You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. Yes. Welcome to the Mike Riley Now podcast here on the Young Angels of America Network. I am your host, Mr. Mike Riley. Welcome one and all. It is Thursday, March the 23rd of 2017. We want to thank y'all for joining us. You all get yourself a round of applause. Yes, welcome to all my people listening in on iTunes, everybody on Spreaker. Of course, we are all the way live on Facebook Live. I am also live on Instagram Live, Mike Riley Now. You can join me there. I'm also joined by my incredible and lovely and talented co-host, Miss Charlie Sandy, and my girl Cam Robson, who are talking about going on their way to college here pretty soon. So we want to definitely give them a round. Y'all are picking out colleges.
We're terrified.
Don't worry, man. College is fun. College was horrible for me, but
Don't say that.
Well, I was a bad student. Y'all aren't bad
music.
students. Yeah, that was just shit. Yeah. Don't be If you're gonna be a music major, take it real serious. This is some different type of stuff. But anyway, everybody who's listening in, thank you so much. Please log on to MikeRileyNow.com. Of course, join us all the way live as we are broadcasting all the way live. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and everything else on the like. Remember, we are on iHeartRadio as well. And I am broadcasting live on Instagram Live, but I got a bad angle here, so maybe we'll fix that here pretty soon. But we'll talk about that some more in the future. All right, y'all, let's jump right into it. I don't want to waste too much time tonight because there's a lot going on in the wonderful world of the world. The wonderful world, the wonderful world of the world. I don't even know where to start, but I'll tell you where I'll start. I'll start with an experience I had this past weekend. So this past weekend, I was with a friend, with a bunch of friends. And we were celebrating a birthday, and one of my friends said, Mike, I've been listening to your podcast, and I can't really grasp what it is you're talking about. You're going to have to kind of dumb it down for me just a little bit. Not dumb it down, but kind of explain it in a way where the average person who doesn't really follow politics or government or whatever else the case may be can actually get into it. And it kind of made me think for a minute, like, now how can I effectively really do that? And then I started thinking, well, why is it that people can't really grasp what it is what it is we're kind of talking? Not to say that that's everybody. A lot of people can keep up with what we're saying. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to explain a lot of these complex issues in a way that seems appealing to the masses, and that's something that liberals do, because liberals talk about the math. We speak facts. We come out with actual numbers, statistics, things like that. On the flip side, though, you do have the right or the conservative base, who usually their base are people who you can kind of talk that way to. They're a little more, not to say that they're dumbed down, but if you watch Fox News, and we're going to do a whole show on Fox News here pretty soon. I got a whole show dedicated to Fox News, man. If you listen to Fox News, it's kind of like a dumbed down rhetoric. Now, there's this conservative talk show host. Her name is Tomi Lahren. We talked about her on this show before. She had this show called The Blaze, where she talks, on her conservative side and argued her conservative points of view. And those conservative points of view that she argued were always from like real simple point of view. No big fat, it's easy just to sit there and say, oh, the Black Lives Matter is the new Ku Klux Klan, but da-da-da-da-da, stuff like that. Now, the funny thing is, the hypocritical thing is, not hypocritical, but the ironic, thing is, this week she got fired from her show. One of her big arguments is the reason why is because, or one of her big talking points is that liberals are a lot like crybabies, right? We get mad at people if they disagree with us on just one issue or something along those lines.
We're snowflakes.
We're snowflakes, yeah. All that kind of cool stuff. And she gets mad because she says every time, you disagree with the liberal on one issue, they want to throw the chair at you. Well, Tomi Lahren went on The View this week, and when she was on The View, they asked her how she felt about being pro-choice versus, pro-life. And she said she was pro-choice. She said, well, if I want the government to stay out of my X, Y, and Z, then the government should also stay out of my body, and it shouldn't be able to tell me what I can and can't do with my body.
Which I will say is like the strongest argument I've ever heard made by a Republican for being pro-choice.
Right, exactly.
It's incredibly hypocritical to be a Republican and want government to be out of all your affairs and then say that the government can control the female body.
Exactly. Which is a pretty, that lines up with their logic. She can go illogically against that. So as a result of being pro-choice, she lost her show.
I'm actually quite proud of her. Like, I may not...
Don't be proud of her.
But, I mean, I don't agree with her for a lot of things and for a lot of reasons, but she kind of stood her ground on this, which was quite impressive because normally you wouldn't see someone like this do that.
Now...
On that stance.
Exactly. And Cam, you brought up a very amazing point, which kind of segues into my next one, right? So, Tomi Lahren lost her show by the very same people off of the very same mindset that she goes around criticizing liberals for, right? Because this week, conservatives are trying to get their Supreme Court justice nominated, this guy named Neil Gorsuch. We talked about him before. They're trying to get him onto the Supreme Court. Now, when Barack Obama, well, let me back this up a little bit here, give you guys a little bit of background information. Basically, what's happening right now is the Democrats are threatening to filibuster, and what a filibuster is, it means that they're going to protest a specific law or specific nomination by another part of the government. They're going to protest this. And conservatives are saying, look at you liberals. You're out here obstructing the government. You're not allowing us to basically for the government to do their job. When this is the same thing Republicans did to Barack Obama for 8 years. And let's not forget the last year of Barack Obama's presidency, Anthony Scalia died. And when Anthony Scalia died, it was President Barack Obama's job to nominate somebody new to the Supreme Court. The Republicans wouldn't even let him get a hearing. This is the same thing the Republicans did to the liberals, to the Democrats, excuse me. And as a result, look what's going on. Now, I know a lot of people out there. Now, I'm going to try my best to explain this in a way where hopefully I can get people to kind of understand it. Because that's what I really want to do. I really want to connect with people who don't know much about what's going on. So let's talk about the Supreme Court, because a lot of people don't really know what's going on with the Supreme Court, like what it is and how it works and a whole bit like that, right? So the Supreme Court, there's 3 branches of our government, as everybody knows. There's the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. The judicial branch is the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court basically is they're like the kings of America. They're like the monarchy, right? They're the ones who say what the Constitution, they're the ones who interpret the Constitution. The thing about it is the president is the person who has to appoint those justices. When those justices get appointed to the Supreme Court, it's not like getting elected to public office. They're on there for life. You have to die off that mug, You can't just be voted out of office or whatever else the case may be, which is why this is such a big deal.
They're the longest holding position in government.
Exactly. Not to mention, they're the ones who interpret the Constitution. They're the ones who say what's law and what's not law. If somebody, let's say, for instance, somebody has, if I'm gay and I want to get married, and I say, well, it's my constitutional right to be able to pursue happiness, regardless of my race, creed, color, or sexual orientation, and some state says, no, you can't do that here in Mississippi. And I say, well, Mississippi is part of the United States. The United States Constitution says I can do this. Well, I can take that to the Supreme Court. Now, it's the Supreme Court's job to sit there and look at the Constitution and say, well, you know what? The Constitution says you do have the right to pursue happiness, no matter who you are. So therefore, you have a right to get married. But that doesn't always work that way, does it? And why? It's because specific people from specific backgrounds get appointed to the Supreme Court. Like conservatives. If you have a conservative president, they're going to appoint a conservative justice, which is where Anthony Scalia came from, which is where, Clarence Thomas comes from. Now, there's supposed to be 9 justices on the Supreme Court at all times. And one of them died last year, who was Anthony Scalia. So Barack Obama brought up Merrick Garland, and the Republicans, and at that point, that's when Congress gets together and does a hearing for the justice. They ask him questions to see if he wants to get nominated on the court, if he gets put on the court. For the first time in American history, the Republican-controlled Senate and House refused to give Merrick Garland a hearing. And as a result, they kicked him out, and then they put this guy, Neil Gorsuch, in. Now, who's Neil Gorsuch? Y'all know anything about him?
Nothing except that he's a fundamental constitutionalist.
Right. He's definitely a fundamental constitutionalist. And what Charlie's referring to is he's the kind of person where he says he interprets the Constitution literally. So when interpreting the Constitution literally, meaning
word for word,
right?
What it meant in the 1700s, it should mean the exact same today.
Exactly. So in other words, he kind of looks at the Constitution, exactly just like what you said, Charlie. The exact same way they kind of interpreted it back in the 1700s, And granted, he'll argue he doesn't take it word for word, but he pretty much does.
Yeah. And this would be the same document that would declare Cameron and I to not have voices and Mike to be 3/5 of a person.
Exactly. I think Elizabeth Warren, let me find my notes here. Hold on. I cannot find them. Well, Elizabeth Warren kind of described Neil Gorsuch, I think, the best.
Elevator music playing?
I can't find my notes. I hate when I misplace my notes. Let me see if I can find them on the computer, because I'll post this up on MikeRileyNow.com, by the way, so that way everybody can kind of see it. But here it is. I think Elizabeth Warren really described them best. She said, sorry, hold on. Okay, here.
The suspense is killing.
The suspense is killing everybody. She says, Gorsuch has taken positions that are even more extreme than his extremely conservative colleagues. When it comes to the rules that protect public health and safety, Gorsuch is more radical than Scalia was. Right? She also says, on the bench, the judicial decision shows a remarkable ability to shape and reshape legal arguments in ways that benefit large corporations and disadvantage ordinary people seeking justice. In the Burwell versus Hobby Lobby store case, and I'll tell you all about this later, when he had the right to choose the rights of corporations over the rights of women, Gorsuch sided with the corporations. He is a long sider of corporations and the rich. He is somebody who believes that women manipulate a maternal leave in order to get the benefits. This was a big argument that he had for one of his students named Jennifer Sisk, where she argued Gorsuch raised a question that said, do women use their employers for maternity benefits and then leave after giving birth?
I'd like to see him pop a child out of those groins, Jesus. Then tell me if he wants to go back to work immediately afterwards.
He's also a big praiser of this guy named Hans von Spassky. I can't say the guy's name very well. Hans von Spassky. Spassky. He's obviously not Eastern European of some sort. But Hans von Spassky was actually, he worked under the Bush administration, and he was a big proponent of voter suppression. He's one of the leaders of the birther movement. You know, the movement that talked about Barack Obama being some sort of a person from Kenya or whatever else the case may be. Or he was born from Kenya. He was born in Kenya.
Our current president headed.
Like boasting around, the one that he took, like, you know, a big part in. He's a big proponent of that as well.
Dude, with a name like Spakovsky, you can't exactly be arguing someone else isn't from America.
That's true. It just, I was like, it's Eastern European somehow. I think it's like an Eastern European name. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is the person that Donald Trump wants to put on the Supreme Court. He's the person that stood by the Citizens United decision. If those of you who don't know, the Citizens United decision was the big decision that said that corporations are people and money is free speech. This was a big part, a huge part of what Gorsuch argues for.
If we had Jackass Bingo, he would have ticked all the boxes by now.
Yeah. I think it's pretty serious. And to make it come back full round, you got to understand that these are people who are on this court for life. They're the ones who interpret the Constitution. They're the ones who say what's law. Let's not forget things like Brown versus the Board of Education, Roe v. versus Wade. Let's not forget the Dred Scott decision. Things like this that I need you all to kind of Google search and look up because I can't explain it all in this podcast here.
Basically civil rights.
Right.
All that good stuff.
All that good jazz for civil rights, because this is a very important part. And this was probably one of the biggest parts of the election, because Hillary Clinton, was, if she had won, she would have appointed a justice that would have helped overturn a lot of these things like Citizens United and help move forward progress. That was the most important part of the election to me. Forget all of the other, Hillary Clinton's emails and crime bills and fracking and all that other shit. The Supreme Court was very, 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 very important.
And yet was one of the things that was understated completely in the election. If you didn't know where to look and you didn't understand the full extent of what was happening, then it went completely over your head. I know it went over my head,
right?
And I'm sure many others.
Exactly, and which is why I always say that Hillary Clinton ran a bad campaign, because she could have brought that up a whole lot more during her campaign. All right, y'all. We'll be right back on the other side of this break. Something to think about. We'll see you on a second. You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. Yes. All right, y'all, and welcome back. Thank you so much for rocking with me. Everybody who's rocking with me on Instagram Live, on Facebook Live. If you are listening to a recorded version of this show, God bless you. Thank you so much. Do me a favor and tell people about this show. Tell people about what's going on. Please provide feedback. I was talking to somebody the other day about media, about our forms of media that we have. You have to understand that a lot of people are getting media that has a corporate filter to it. You watch CNN, you watch Fox News, you watch MSNBC. God bless Rachel Maddow and a lot of other media outlets that actually do a good job of journalism, but you're still not getting, the full scale of what you need to be looking for, based upon the idea that it's going through a corporate filter. So underground media, things like podcasts and things that we're doing now, that's going to be our way of communicating with people. So you got to tell people about this show. Let everybody know what's going on. Spread the word, please. And log on to MikeRileyNow.com and do all that other stuff. All right, cool. So we're going to get back into news of the week. Let's talk about this attack that happened in London. Now, I really wanted to bring this up because my girl Charlie's straight out of London.
Straight out of London.
The album's dropping next week.
Straight out of West London.
That's right, baby.
In like a really posh part, so it really doesn't work at all.
Chip Cheerios. So yeah, I know. I said it again. That's horrible. You guys have very poppin' stuff that happens out there too? You guys
yes,
fly
I came here via umbrella.
Oh, my bad, umbrella. I said broom. That's
a witch, dude. Come on.
Well, anyway, not a laughing matter. As many of you know, there was an attack at the Parliament building on the Westminster Bridge in London this week, where a guy drove his car across the Westminster Bridge and ran over a lot of people, and then got out, and I think he stabbed a few people, and about 3 or 4 people died, and a lot of people got injured. It was about 4 people that died, right? Yeah. That was kind of, and after that there was just this huge push. This and the guy who did it, he claimed, or ISIS kind of, I guess, claimed him, and ISIS said, well, he's working for ISIS and all this other stuff, so they gave him his props. Although I don't really know if I believe that, because ISIS just did it through their social media site. The guy was born and bred in England. He wasn't from one of those Muslim majority countries or anything like that, and he did this attack. Now, one of the big reasons for the Brexit, and one of the big reasons for the push against Angela Merkel and all these other people, is because of the refugee crisis that's going on in Europe. A lot of people think that the Muslims that are coming in from the war-torn countries are bringing all of this all this hate in with them. When in reality, this dude wasn't even born in, he wasn't even from a Muslim majority country. So I don't really know if that made a big difference. And I'll say one more thing about it too. And I'm gonna let you guys talk about it. But okay, about 4 people died in this raid, and there was this huge campaign for it. There's a huge hashtag, huge pray for London campaign, huge everybody go out and all that kind of stuff, right? Not to take the gravity away from the situation, because it's tragic. It should never happen. 4 people got killed. It was a senseless act of violence, random act of violence. But earlier this year in January, Donald Trump led a raid in Yemen. Not Donald, our president, I should say. Greenlit a raid in Yemen where 27 civilians got killed, including a little girl. And there was no hashtag campaign.
Remember Yemen.
Yeah, none of that stuff will happen. So I just think it's when innocent people get gunned down in Muslim countries or in brown countries, it's really not it's not a terrorist attack to us, is it?
No, not
but
at
maybe
all.
to
Because
them it's like, holy shit.
It's not in an ally country that we think of as like our own, because you'll see countries that are majority white and speak English. We suddenly feel the impact much greater, even if they don't speak English, like
right.
somewhere like France.
Exactly.
It's still a white majority place where thus the majority of Americans feel, oh my god, they're just like us, this could happen to us as well.
Exactly.
Whereas you get somewhere that has a majority non-white population, or is like Muslim majority country, and you'll go, well, they don't follow our same ideals, they're completely different culture than us, thus we're safe.
It's really a us versus them mentality.
It's an isolation.
Yeah, and it's like we just don't even realize that they're exactly like us, and they're walking down the street too, and they're have families too, and if their relatives or themselves get gunned down in the street, it's like for some reason we just don't seem to understand that they have lives just like we do.
Yes.
And,
exactly.
And I think something that's been when I look at this, big plastered all over the news, London terror attack. I remember when it was first being published, like terror attack in Parliament, and I was expecting, to turn on the news and it was going to be a bomb that had just been dropped on the Houses of Parliament. It was a terrible thing that happened. But I can't help but think that in LA alone that day, there were probably about 4 people stabbed.
Oh, yeah.
that weren't reported easily. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And because this has quote unquote terror ties to it, it's suddenly a very large deal, very big deal. And I also, little word of advice to those Second Amendment Americans here. The guy only killed 4 people because he had a knife. And that's because in England, you don't carry guns, because we don't have, even our police don't carry guns. This guy was shot down, not by a regular policeman, by a full-on guy in like SWAT uniform kind of guy carrying a gun. This guy could have done monumental damage to everyone around. He could have gotten through the gates if he gunned down all of those policemen with some sort of, automatic, semi-automatic.
There were some SWAT people there. I think he was gunned down by a plainclothes officer.
Yes.
But in either case, you hit something right on the button there with that one. Our show last week, it got a lot of crazy reviews. I had a lot of people listen to it. And you know what's funny? A lot of people ended up agreeing with me. They were like, yeah,
nice.
Insurance, license and registration on guns. Makes sense.
Really does. And as we've seen now, as somewhat twisted as this will sound, considering 2 people have tragically died,
right?
It can save lives. Because think of the potential losses that could have been that haven't happened. Exactly.
So yeah, that's just something to think about. Unfortunately, that attack happened, and that's a horrible thing, but at the same time, it's just like what Cam was talking about. I think it's important for us to recognize all human life. And, when people get gunned down because of stuff that we do, I mean, imagine a little 11-year-old girl got killed in that Yemen raid. So, stuff like that, it really needs to be transcended. But anyway, that's for another conversation. All right, this next news story is kind of interesting. It says that this one's on the Washington Post, and I'm going to put these on MikeRileyNow.com, but it says that Trump signs a NASA bill aimed at sending people to Mars. Trump actually did something I agree with. Holy shit.
Can we start with him? Can we just send a solar mission of him to his home country? Leave
to
us
his home planet.
Home planet.
Yeah, send Trump back to. It's like, so Trump is actually just like a light red. He's not actually orange.
Yeah. DT Von Ho.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yes, we have to definitely send Trump back to his alien planet. Maybe he can get with the rest of his Trumpkins, and then they can rule Mars the way they want to. But the article goes on to read that President Trump just signed a bill authorizing $19.5 billion in funding for NASA, the first such authorization and bill for the space agency in 7 years. The bill more or less aligns with the budget blueprint Trump laid out last week. NASA won't face the same cuts as other science and medical agencies, which stand to lose huge portions of their budget under the president's proposal. Sending humans to Mars by the 2030 remains NASA's long-term goal, and Congress will continue to fund the construction space launch rocket program. Interesting. You know what's funny? You know who's a big critic of this? Is Elon Musk. He hates this shit. He's like, I don't want Trump touching NASA or anything like that. I don't know. It might be a competition thing.
I think it is definitely a competition thing.
I got to read more into it. I don't know all the facts on it.
He doesn't want anyone funding NASA because he wants
funding Mars
NASA
mission.
Yeah. Because he wants to do it himself. And I think it's really fascinating that Trump has done this, and part of me wants to go, well done to you, tip my hat to you for understanding the importance of continuing forward in space exploration. Right. But the other part of me thinks that he's doing this because he wants to go, I was the first. I was the first. I went I was the biggest in space exploration. I went the furthest. He wants to beat Nixon. He wants to, great. He put a man on the moon. Well, I'm going to put a man on Mars.
Exactly. He's going to put him. Yeah. I agree with you on that.
It's the bigger planet. It's bigly.
Yeah. I'm all for the resistance, man. Don't give that man not one victory. Screw that. Please don't land on Mars. But at the same time, I got to say, man, that's something I do agree with. I do agree with funding our space programs. I do agree with funding our programs. And that's government. NASA's a government program. So he's funding government. He's just taking money away from the EPA and shit that we actually need. So we'll talk about some of this stuff. All right, y'all. We'll be right back.
Live long this is the
Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. We'll be right back. You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Mike Riley Now podcast here on the Young Angels Network. Log on to youngangelsnetwork.org. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you donate. That is how we keep the lights on in here. We want to thank everybody who's been riding with us this far. Everybody who checks out the show, thank you so much. God bless every single last one of you. Please make sure that you log on to MikeRileyNow.com. Once again, follow us on the Facebook, Instagrams, the Twitters, all that cool stuff. Please tell your next of kin about it. That is how we spread the word around here, y'all. It's very, very important. All right. Let's bring back the economic portion of our show because we haven't done that in a couple weeks. And economics, it pretty much fuels just about everything. Nothing happens without economics unless we go back to our barter system, which is a form of commerce, which is a form of economics. So let's get into it. And what I want to talk about this week is kind of it's an interesting topic. It's about the minimum wage, right? Okay. Now, I was reading this article on Alternate that came out a couple days ago, and it says, why are Republicans so relentlessly cruel to the poor? And I'm going to put this one up online. And it was written by Chauncey De Vega. And he talks about a girl, a couple different examples and how Speaker Paul Ryan, by his own account, is pretty much pushing specific legislation that is so anti-poor, so anti you get out of poverty, so anti that it's really crazy. It's really not even funny. Everything from stripping Medicare to stripping benefits to cutting taxes on the wealthiest Americans. And one of the big proponents that Paul Ryan and Donald Trump and a lot of other corporate Republicans are pushing through is freezing the minimum wage or abolishing the minimum wage just altogether. Now, this is a kind of one I'm curious to know how people feel about this. Okay, the minimum wage. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about. There's a difference between minimum wages, right? There's the federal minimum wage, and then there's your state's minimum wage, right? Now your state can set your minimum wage at whatever it wants to set it at, but as long as it doesn't dip below the federal minimum wage, it's fine. Right now, the federal minimum wage is $7, and I think it's 50 cents an hour, $7.50, something like that, right? You cannot live by any means in hell off $7.50 an hour. Now, one of the big Republican arguments for this is, well, all jobs shouldn't be jobs that you should be able to support a family and live off of. That's what they say. They say shit like that.
What's the hell the point of getting the job?
Well, they got because back when they were growing up, back in the day, in like the 1960s and 70s, when you were like 16, 17 years old, you got a job down at McDonald's or Burger King or whatever the fuck, and you went there and you worked for your little
pocket money.
Yeah, you got pocket money, and that was your money. You went to go, buy your, go to the movies and buy penny candy and all that other cool shit. It ain't like that no more.
There are legitimate people who are trying to support families who are working at McDonald's, who are working at the gas station, who don't have another choice other than that. And it's foolish to think that just because they still have this view of a certain company only supporting kids who don't need money, that they should then neglect all of those that rely on it as their source income for everything. Not to mention,
a lot of these people work 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
40 hours a week is full time.
I'd like to know how much people making these laws work.
Yeah. Oh, they make tons of money. They're not hurting for anything.
And they sure as hell ain't working 40 hours a week.
Nah. Now, one of the big arguments against raising the minimum wage, for example, though, right? Because a lot of Democrats, a lot of people on the left are for raising the minimum wage. We want to raise the federal minimum wage to a workable and livable wage. The federal minimum wage should really be $15 an hour. But, Barack Obama suggested last year to raise it to at least $10.25 an hour. He said, we can do this over a course of, 5-10 years. We'll gradually raise it to $10.50 an hour. So that way it can keep up with what's called inflation. When things don't keep up with, in other words, when the prices of goods go up, the prices of wages should naturally go up with it. Now, since I think the federal minimum wage has been frozen for quite some time, and the price of goods have gone up, but wages have not. They have remained stagnant. Republicans and libertarians often argue, well, if you raise wages, you're going to raise the bottom line and you're going to have inflation. So people are going to charge more for their goods. So a Big Mac, I don't know how much a Big Mac costs. I don't eat at McDonald's. But let's say it costs, $4? Help me out here, TV land, $4. So your Big Mac won't cost $4. Your Big Mac will cost, $4.50 now. But on the flip side of that, you're making more money. Also, too, they argue that if you raise the minimum wage, it's also going to hurt the people that it's supposed to benefit. The reason why is because if you raise the minimum wage, you're going to have to fire a lot of your work staff. You're going to have to get rid of a lot of the people who work for you because you're not going to be able to afford to pay them. I call bullshit on that, too. Now, I've listened to a lot of prime, economists like Robert Reich and a lot of other people like that who show the math in this. And if you go on MikeRallyNow.com, if you go on there right now on the top of the page, I actually put this article up by thinkprogress.org. They've done the math on this already, on raising the minimum wage to $10.10. Even if you do have a little bit of economic displacement, at the end of the day, won't more people actually benefit from it?
Yeah.
I mean, let me get my notes. I gotta, get my notes together here. there that fear of inflation, and even if it, like I said, even if that were to happen, and by the way, never before in the history of the the minimum wage act, I think it was called the Fair Works and Protections Act, or the Fair Works and Labor Act, or something like that, came into effect, I think, in 1938, and they set the minimum wage to 25 cents an hour. Okay, ever since 1938, the minimum wage has gone up. Right, it's at $7.50 an hour now. Right, so it's gone up every year, or not every year, but every so often. Never once, when the minimum wage went up, did
inflation occur.
Exactly. That's never happened in the history of the United States. As a matter of fact, every time the minimum wage rises, the GDP goes up. Now, a lot of conservatives argue, well, it was only raised gradually back then. It didn't go from 6 cents an hour to $9.06 an hour. Okay, fine.
But what they're suggesting isn't what liberals are suggesting is not overnight. It's also, it's slightly accelerated, but it's still a gradual increase.
A gradual increase. Yeah. Brain
incline.
farts.
That's what I'm looking for.
A gradual increase, exactly. Not only that, but if you really think about it, right, raising wages. Okay. Goods and services are pushed by demand, right? Employment is driven by demand. When, we've talked about this before. When me and Charlie and Cam open up our pizza factory, when we open up our bakery pizza factory where we make the best pizzas out of muffins, shit is bomb, son. We make pizza muffins. What you know about that? We
make puffins.
Puffins.
I feel like that would turn into a really weird conversation.
Nah, and we have like those little penguins endorse our product, those puffin penguins.
Puffins?
Yeah, puffins, man.
Puffins are not penguins. They're not the same thing.
You sure?
My child.
Yes,
I've seen it.
They're not penguins.
They look like penguins.
No, they don't.
Puffins don't look like anyway, we're getting off topic. What were we even talking about?
The economy, my friends.
We were opening a puffin bakery.
Right. If we open up our pizza muffin bakery, right, and wages are up. When people have wages, they spend 100% of their wages. Yeah, that looks like a penguin to me. They're showing me a picture of a puffin right now on my Facebook, and people who are listening out there, it looks like a penguin to me. But when you raise wages, people will spend 100% of their wages. So if they have 100% of their wages to spend, and they say, well, hey, I actually want to try some of these pizza muffins. Now I have the money to go out and buy them. So that's going to, in turn, increase our revenue too, for me, Charlie, and Cam, because we're selling more puffins now. And when we're selling more puffins, we got to make more puffins. If we make more puffins, we got to hire more people to make the puffins.
And that is what a thriving economy is.
Sounds like math to me, mother.
You can finish the sentence.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
That was awfully faded out.
I know. I do. I have like selective cursing. It's funny.
That
sometimes
was like the me thing of doing it. The really, really loud build-up and the
motherfucker. And on top of that, I don't get the libertarian and conservative argument against not raising wages. Wouldn't you rather live in a country where the bottom wage earner is at least making a good enough wage?
To survive.
Not even to survive, but to do good. Okay, granted, yes, I understand. We live in the United States of America, right? Even the poorest people here have, 2 cars and 2 TVs, okay? I get it. All right, fine. But at the end of the day, we are the richest country on the face of the planet. The people who, and if we're not talking about population, but if we're talking strictly just wages, we're talking just the wage income, most of it is going to the top any damn way. So you're not necessarily pumping more money into the economy. You're just taking it from the top and distributing it back down to the corresponding ships below.
And making the wage gap much
smaller.
It's not even smaller, just a little bit more even. Just a bit, so that we have a nice slope instead of like a drop off.
Right, exactly. Very well said.
Linear, not exponentially going.
Yeah. It's like you gotta think about skiing.
You'd much rather go down the bunny slope, wouldn't you? It's so much easier than like this
triple
black diamond.
Damn, y'all said that in unison. That was tight. Go ahead and give yourself a high five for that. Yeah, they're friends, everybody. Cam and Charlie are friends.
We are.
Yeah, they hang out outside of the podcast.
No, it's just we're neighbors. We can't get away from each other.
Exactly. That's beautiful. But even still, even if I wanted to go skiing, now, granted, if the price of goods goes up, that's okay. Because that will create more competition within the fucking marketplace.
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to create a product that's cheaper. And it's going to drive costs. That's what always happens, ladies and gentlemen. And then you have a more thriving economy. Okay? Now, like I said, I know a lot of people who argue against raising wages has this fear of, oh my God, if we raise the wages, then that means the price of all these goods are going to go up. Or, people are going to fire people. It's going to hurt people. It's going to hurt more people than it actually benefits. And like I said before, I don't think history nor the math actually proves that.
But then again, conservatives are notorious for not particularly liking history nor math. And for some reason, which really is really boggling to me, is that the majority of poor people tend to be more conservative. I guess I would say the majority of people who make minimum wage are in conservative areas of the country.
Yes.
In more Midwestern and that
Southern
kind of area. Southern states
right.
is where you get a majority of...
Red states take more government assistance than blue states.
Yes. And it sort of shocks me that these people are conservative when that's not the party that gives active plans for supporting them. That's the party that sort of pats them on the head and goes, it's all going to be okay. We're going to make it better. You're going to be fine. And they go, okay, that's fine. And they also don't like history and they don't like numbers and facts.
And they vote against their own interests.
And they vote against their own interests because you have these liberals who are practically on their hands and knees going, we will help you, listen to our plans. And they're just stepping over them and going to the one that's, going to give them quote unquote guidance.
I think, Charlie, what's happened here, and next week, I think we're going to do our Fox News show next week. I think that's the one I really want to do. I just got to really produce a good show and put it together. But a lot of these people have watched Fox News, and Fox News has them thoroughly convinced that social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, is the way human beings ought to live.
Self-made man.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you're too poor, well then get your ass up and make more money then. If you if you want a higher wage, work a better job, learn a better skill and get a better job. If you don't want to work at McDonald's and make $5 an hour, then get out there and learn a better skill and learn how to make $30 an hour.
Yeah, just like Donald Trump. Yeah. Except, no, he had a loan of $1 million from his own father.
Exactly. I know it pisses me off too. Talking about started from the bottom, now he's hit. Nope.
Sorry to anyone that's wearing headphones.
Yeah, I apologize. But we actually had a wee bit of a chat in this in Cam and my English class about how it's ridiculous to sort of have two people sitting there and go, well, look, this is equality. We're both going to try and reach the ceiling from the ground, right? Except the one that's saying that is already standing on a chair.
125%. And that's one of the reasons, too, that when I hear people argue against white privilege, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah,
it's just like,
that's
hello.
an entirely other show.
It's like, come on now, Moe. Yeah, so. But in all honesty, I think a minimum wage hike will really benefit our economy. All right, y'all. Well, that is our show today. I want to thank every single last one of you who listened. All my people on Instagram Live, Facebook Live. God bless Charlie. God bless Cam. God bless, who am I missing?
Brooke.
Oh, God, Brooke. And I also forgot to say this last week. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Quoted from my man Tom Hartman and Barack Obama. We all must get involved. We are all in this together. Remember, people, there is no such thing as sovereignty of the man. We are all in this together. We must all fight in this together. So get out there, get involved, tell people about the show. Join Progressive Media, join your local group, and let's take this fight straight to the house. All right, y'all. We will see you next week. God bless you. Thank you so much. We out. Cheers.
Cheers. Chip, chip, cheerio.
You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com.